Hi friends, painting and modeling is my absolute favorite part of 40k, and I've always had a thing for the older models. I just absolutely love the heroic scale. I think it's a really neat art style, and even though the new ones have more detail and are superior on a technical level, the old ones have a really unique charm to them. So I'm always on the prowl for some older MILFs, models I'd like to find, in order to add to my ranks. And many would disagree with me and just want the newest versions, which is totally valid. However, I don't think the new models are just straight upgrades in most cases, and the older models do have their own merit as a unique art style. That being said, I do think there are a few units that I think the older ones are way better. Each of these picks highlights a reason why I really like the heroic scale, so let's get a blast from the past and look at some old models that might even be older than me. In classic GW fashion, let's start off with the Space Marines once more. This is probably the coldest take in the whole video, maybe even ever, but whoo boy do the Desolation Marines look horrible. These are, in my humble opinion, some of the worst models GW has ever made from an artistic level. Not only do the guns look somehow both generically boring and stupid as hell, but the poses for the most part are terrible, especially the Sergeant. Oh my god! Like, most of these guys convey absolutely no weight, despite carrying a gun that's bigger than an entire Firstborn Marine. I know the Marines are supposed to be super duper strong and can lift like a bazillion pounds or whatever, but from a design point of view, heavy weapons should look heavy. Sculptures are a static medium, so the poses and accessories need to tell a story. Additionally, as game pieces, their role on the tabletop should be apparent from an eye's glance. Despite the guns being humongous and having like 8 different types of rockets, they have almost exactly the same pose as regular intercessors with bolters. This creates confusion between their role and their appearance. Plus, let's be honest, these dudes are just kind of boring. They're literally intercessors with a different gun, nothing really differentiates them. Now contrast that with their predecessors, the Devastators. Some may argue that they aren't exactly successors to Devastators, but their names are almost exactly the same, they have a similar battlefield role, and the Sergeant has almost the exact same pose, minus the being terrible part. And the Devastators, they might be squatty and look a bit strange, but the art direction is just so much better than the Desolators. Just look at how they hold their weapons. They're either resting on their shoulders or have that cool underslung heavy gunner look. And either of these poses instantly conveys weight to the viewer, since that's how we, as people, would actually handle heavy things in real life. And somewhat ironically, having the weapons look heavier in the Marines' hands actually makes them look stronger than if the weapons were weightless. It reads like they're actually handling a big heavy object, and not just a large foam prop or something. In addition, they also have other features that set them apart as heavier troops. Like they have extra armor, they have big sensors, they have a big backpack module that serves as either power packs, loaders, or ammo stores for their weapons. And I think the Desolators could actually work pretty well if they just tweaked the poses and made the weapons look weightier. They don't need the extra armor of the Devastators or anything like that because they are backline indirect attackers. So just give the weapons like the underslung pose or the on the shoulder pose, and I think that would look great. And this just really highlights one of mine and many others' issues with the Primaris line. They're just boring. Like, every Marine looks pretty much the same, just with different weapons. Even more so than Space Marines already do. Like, where's the pizzazz? Look at these guys. There's no theme here. It's boring. Like, there's just no swag to be had with a lot of these guys, and that's a darn shame. And I do kind of like the idea of modular tactical armor. Just not for my stupid big bonk mega space knights. That's something like the Dumb Tau would do. I like my Marines to be more antiquated looking with like a amalgamation of different armor marks due to the Imperium's technological losses and decline. The Stern Guard, Blade Guard, and Company Heroes, those guys are a step in the right direction, but honestly, I want them to go further and bring back the more jury-rigged grunge look. And please, oh please, just faithfully update the Mark 7s. I love the Screamer helmet. I love their like whole aesthetic. And the Firstborn Space Marine heroes, those guys are beautiful. Just go further. Give me more customization, please. Okay, enough of the dumb Space Marines. Let's talk demons. And Black Friday came early this year because this next one's a 2-for-1. I feel both the previous iteration, the Demonettes and the Pink Horrors, look a lot better than the new ones. Not only do they look cooler, but they also visually fit the theme of the units they're supposed to convey a lot better than the new ones. Okay, so first off, the Demonettes. Demonettes are the main lesser demon of Slaanesh. They are described as having a hypnotic glamour, and they're supposed to be both beautiful and repulsive in a weird, chaotic way. Additionally, they're said to fight with extreme speed and grace. With all those traits in mind, here's the current models. Disgusting. These things are pretty dang bad. And I'm not one to thirst over a 1-inch plastic lady, but nothing about these scream gross but alluring. They just went full on into the gross part, which works for most demons, but not the demonettes. To me, the demonettes should be like sirens who lure in victims, and then once they're up close, they're actually really gross and uncanny. But by then, it's already too late, and your pee-pee's in a blender. In addition to the pure aesthetics, the poses are honestly really bad. Like, they look really lead-footed and planted in place for some reason, which doesn't fit the Demonettes whatsoever. They look like crappy H&M mannequins with lobster fingers. It's honestly horrid. Now look at the old Juan Diaz Demonettes. Oh my god, wow. It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details. Everything the new models do wrong, these Demonettes do right. From afar, they look like regular, pale emo hotties. Then up close, you see so many features that are just weird and uncanny. Their hair is gross tentacles, they have Voldemort noses, weird black fish eyes, and other gross stuff that's honestly probably even more of a turn on for some of the internet folks. And the poses, ooh, the poses just look way better. Even though there's only a few set poses, they all look far, far better. They all look in motion, almost as if they're dancing and taunting their enemies, and this perfectly fits the feel that the Demonette should emanate. And there's also another reason people like these old Demonette models. 2 to 6 reasons to be exact. The only thing that I think the new ones do better is that Demonettes are supposed to be hermaphroditic. And that being said, I do find the one boob look to be kind of silly for this. To me, the hermaphroditic aspect of Demonettes is cooler if they're constantly shifting forms and their features are ever changing. Oh, but how can you convey changing form and shifting motions in a static mini, Crack Duck? You're a fool! Well, let me present to you the Juan Diaz Horrors of Zinj. Oh, ooh, wow. Oh my god, these guys look even cooler than Demonettes. To me, these are some of the best Chaos models GW has ever made. It's a real shame to see how they got updated. Get ready. These little metal pieces of absolute perfection were replaced with... yeah, chewed pieces of Hubba Bubba. A travesty, I say. Again, I think GW focused too much on one aspect of the models. In this case, they nailed the pink part. These fellas are definitely pink. But boy, oh boy, did the Horrors of Zinj get the horror part much better. Not only are they once again more dynamic than the new ones, but they also tell such a cool story. Most of them are running forward, brimming with warp flame. The way the tentacles are sculpted also makes it feel like they're constantly tangling around as they scramble through the war zone. But the best part, the splitting. Holy moly, does the splitting look cool. Look at this guy, look at him. He is ripping himself out of his little buddy. Oh my god, that is beautiful. Look at what GW took away from us. Ah! And also, worst of all, the made to order these horrors, it did not have the splitting guys. Why the hell not? I love my metal horrors, but the real horror was opening the box and not having any of the coolest sculpts in the set. Why is GW gatekeeping splitting horrors from us? What could the meaning of this be? Is there a greater conspiracy afoot? Do they not want splitting? We need to demand we get our splitting horrors back. And the only issue with these guys is that they're a little bit small, but honestly, I kind of like the horrors being little tangly gremlins that go around flaming and causing mischief. I don't think every demon needs to be big, and honestly, the thought of a tiny ball of teeth splitting in half and cartwheeling towards you with great ferocity is a lot more startling than some big pink loser with a flag and dagger. And while we're on the topic of chaos, let's talk Marines again. This one's a bit different from the others since I think the new models look as good, if not better than the old ones, just in a different art style. However, I prefer what the old ones represent and the art direction they took. The Rogue Trader, Chaos, and Renegade Space Marines are just such cool fellas, and I want them all. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the current Chaos Legionary models. However, I think the idea that the old ones were trying to convey is a lot more interesting. Most Chaos Space Marines are supposed to be these weird, corrupted abominations due to their home sweet home being hell, not sweet hell. And the new Marines, they don't really play into this that much. They mostly just look like spiky Space Marines. The Possessed kind of get this idea down, but I think a lot of the Rogue Trader era Space Marines capture a cool point where the Marines are quote-unquote slightly mutated, but not full-on possessed. I like the Marines who look almost normal, but their armor is warped, pun intended, and fused to the Marine inside. This one dude in particular looks really cool to me because I like how his armor was kind of like mutated to look more like a bloodletter, and then he has this like cool tail. But this is even more subjective than the rest, but I really like when the warp mutations are weird wacko things versus just the typical Cronenberg body horror type look. Chaos should be chaotic, and I feel like the new models are almost too uniform most of the time. Like, just look at this bold dude in Bugman. I love him. So, to fix this problem that probably only me and like 3 other people on r/Oldhammer have, I think they should add a unit that's a median between the Legionaries and the Possessed. These dudes will have like a few mutations, their armor's warped, and maybe a little demon armor or something. Kind of like the Legionaries killed Team Anointed, but just a little bit further, that would be really neat. Next, let's talk the good old Guard. The Marine segment was probably a super cold take, so here's what might be a hot take. I personally don't really like the new Guard models. Not really that much at all, actually. Other than the Kazarkin, those guys are beautiful. Like, on a technical level, they're great, but personally, I really dislike the art direction GW seems to be taking them. I really like the guard aesthetic of mostly bulky, blocky, rugged-looking armors and weapons. I think it's cool that most of the 40k factions had a unique design identity tied to their units' basic shapes. And this kind of highlighted the differences between the humans, the aliens, and the horrors. Now I feel like it's kind of getting more muddied as a lot of the new models have been trending towards a generic sci-fi sleekness, which I kind of hate. And the model that absolutely epitomizes this for me is the new Guard Sentinel. On its own, with no context, it's a great sci-fi walker design. It's just not a very good Imperial Guard design, in my opinion. To me, there's two main issues, and first off, like I said, it's just way too sleek. It almost looks like a Tau vehicle to me, and of course, this is subjective, but I generally really do not like the Imperial Guard being sleek like this. The Rogel Dorn, the Shock Troops, and even the new Kazarkin to an extent have this issue, which again is not objectively an issue, but to me I prefer the blocky look. The Guard having big, blocky, somewhat dopey armor and equipment visually conveys how they have relatively basic kit compared to other factions like Eldar, Tau, and even in other branches of the Imperium. It also makes them look more rugged and disposable in my opinion. And to me, the Guard being sleek, it kind of goes against their faction fantasy. For these reasons, I also really dislike a lot of the elements of the new Cadians, but to keep this video from being an hour-long rant about plastic army men, I digress. Reason 2 why I find the new Sentinel to be inferior to the old, it's just too big. I liked how the old Sentinel was literally just big enough to fit a guardsman, and they're like super cramped in there. I think it's super guard-esque to squeeze a poor guardsman into a cannon-toting metal death box that's only just barely big enough to hold him. And the new one, it's basically a luxury crossover SUV in terms of legroom. And honestly, I would have liked this design a lot more if it was just branded as like a super heavy Sentinel or something. I think it actually does look pretty good next to the old one and would work as a beefier sister vehicle. It would also preferably have a lot more edge and look a lot less sleek. Also, the legs are hard to pose in the new one. Like, why are we going backwards, GW? Finally, let's close off with the Tau. The Tau stealth suits are the smallest of their battle suits and they're used for infiltration and sabotage missions. Now technically these models aren't the same thing and the new one is the XV-25 stealth suit, which is an upgrade of the older XV-15 stealth suit. However, the old ones just look so much cooler, it's kind of absurd. The old ones, they kind of feel like Tau version of Kazarkin, and that is already perfect. Along with looking cooler, they also have a slimmer profile that fits the stealth suit infiltrator theme a lot better in my opinion. The old guys really do look like elite commandos with extra gear for advanced recon operations. I could just imagine them cloaking, uncloaking, and then unloading their burst cannons on some unlucky combatant. Or them just like jetpacking into enemy lines and then blasting some space marines from behind. Like, really cool stuff. And the new ones, on the other hand, they kind of just look like walking eggs. Which, like, that's kind of lame. They kind of look clumsy and kind of dorky. I know the stealth is amplified by disruption and stealth fields, dampers, and whatever other sci-fi stuff, but visually, the XV-25 doesn't really sell the stealth or infiltration theme at all to me. Even the 8-foot giant Phobos Space Marines visually sell this idea better to me. I also recognize the idea that the Tau might have advanced their stealth tech enough to allow larger weapons platforms to utilize it and still be stealthy, which would explain the larger models. However, I don't like the trend of every faction following orc logic of bigger is better. The Tau are supposed to be the advanced tech race who are generally more practical than most other factions, and it would be a lot more interesting for them to go against the general convention of ever-growing units. Also, again, a little callback to the Devastators, but the underslung giant gun look just does it for me so hard. My neurons fire off like crazy when I see them. Ooh, it is lovely. And I think these two designs can coexist, especially since the lore says that the XV-15 is still somewhat widely used. I think it would be especially cool if they reintroduced the XV-15s as a kill team. I think they'd be a cool team in addition to the Pathfinders, kind of like the Kazarkin and Vedguard teams, where they're similar, but they have a few unique and fun gameplay twists. Jetpacks and stealth fields would be especially cool to explore, I think. And with that, those are just some models that I think their old version looks better than their current ones. This video is probably the most opinion-based one yet, and I just really love the older 40k aesthetic, so I'm super biased. But let me know what you think. What old models really do it for you? Or alternatively, you could tell me why the heroic scale is absolute garbage and deserves to die in a fiery car crash. Also, let me know if you like these more hobby/miniature focused videos for the channel. Like I said, the painting and hobby aspect is my #1, so I'd be happy to make some more. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing to all your favorite old models. Thanks. I also opened a Patreon if you were interested in supporting the channel a little bit extra. Here's a few folks who already joined, so a huge, humongous thank you to them. I really appreciate it. And I think we all know who the real hottest demonette model is. Huey!